How do I get started? Because AI is so much hype in the news, but how do I practically use this to, for instance, have a business or just change my life, in some ways?
I think that actually one of the things is what you want to do is educate yourself to an extent where you can get around this hype, right? Because that will allow you not to be taken in by the most flashy tool, but the one that's going to work best for your use case, right? And so I think to do that, you need a little bit of expertise in certain areas. You don't need to do a PhD. By all means, come and do a PhD with me. That would be fun. But if you haven't got the time to do that and you want to get in on AI more quickly, then sure, there's lots of things we can do. The first thing is, you don't need a tremendous amount of mathematical knowledge. To run AI, you definitely don't need much mathematical knowledge at all. You can even train networks without much mathematical knowledge. If you want to read the papers and understand the networks, you might need to know a little bit of linear algebra and things like this, right? But that's about the extent of it. You can get away with a little bit less. I don't mind maths. I use it when I have to. I avoid it also quite a lot of the time. So, it's not so bad. The primary entry point is going to be learning Python. That's the main thing you need to do. For whatever reason, I've said this before, I have a love-hate relationship with Python. Some days it's my best friend, some days I can't stand it. But ultimately, this is what the AI community has settled on. If you're going to use machine learning, Python is going to be the thing that runs your networks. Python is going to be the things that handles the input and the output of those networks. Now, of course, they're all actually implemented in C for speed and CUDA on the graphics card, but you interface with them using Python. So that's the first place to get started.
And do you have any courses, or do I need to? It's just basic Python. Just grab some how to get started with Python.
Yeah, actually, it is really. I think any appropriate introduction to Python course is going to be fine, because what we're doing in Python is not actually the most complicated things that Python can do. Right? If you're writing enterprise level software, you might not be using Python, but if you were, you'd be using a lot of perhaps more sort of advanced stuff around the edges that you don't need to use to do machine learning at all. The main thing, you need to know how the data structures work, so lists, dictionaries, and then pretty quickly, once you've got a grasp of the fundamentals, you can actually start training up smaller networks to get your head around the quirks of each particular library. So for example, PyTorch has a data structure that it uses called a tensor. In fact, actually most AI libraries do, but the tensor is kind of fundamental to how Python and PyTorch works. So the sooner you get going on that and the sooner you play around with these things, you pick them up pretty quickly.
So start with Python, just like a generic Python course, understand lists, dictionaries, basic Python knowledge. Then look at PyTorch. Do I need to understand concepts like supervised, unsupervised learning, all this kind of AI terminology?
What I would say, so, to begin with, not necessarily, right? But what I would say is probably there is a nice progression, actually. Supervised learning is perhaps in some sense the simplest and the easiest to get your head around, mostly because actually still the majority of AI that we see, both in industry and in research, is supervised. It's supervised because that's the easiest one.